for Commerce and Tourism and Cannabis, and to her left, Representative Vicente Camacho, the chairman for Federal and Foreign Affairs. Just walked in, Representative Edwin Probst, the chairman for Gaming, and then to my right, up here in the dais, we have Vice Chair Representative Ivan Blanco, and I am the chair for Ways and Means, Donald Mangonia. Good afternoon, members. Good afternoon, director and board members, and your team. We are gathered here today to discuss MVA's budget requests, along with the governor's proposal on the general fund and ARPA, to meet the needs of MVA. Looking at the analysis done by our fiscal analysts, MVA had submitted a request of around 3.3 million, in which the combination of general fund and ARPA also comes out to that amount. So the governor has proposed what MVA has requested. But before we move on to questioning, we'll allow MVA to go ahead and provide us with any presentation they may have. And again, before we do, just assisting the committee, with us today, we have the LB staff. To my right, we have our senior legislative assistant, Ms. Claire Sablon, our fiscal analyst, Mr. Tom Rabago, our legal counsel, Joe Tyrone, our IT personnel, Jonathan Diaz, and our Sergeant at Arms, Mr. Dennis Regis. Again, good afternoon, Director. At this time, I'll now hand the floor over to you to provide any opening remarks or any. I see there's a presentation, so we'll leave that up to you. Thank you.
Hafaday, Tito Wami, and thank you, Chairman Maglonia and honorable members of the legislature for inviting the Marianas Visitors Authority to join you today and to provide an overview of our plans for next year under the FY 2022 budget request. And if I may, I would like to introduce my team. To my left, I have our MVA Board Chairperson, Viola Lepuzo. I have our Deputy Managing Director, Judy Torres. And to my right, I have Joanne Parisu, our Chief Accountant. And then behind me, I also have our MVA managers and staff. And if we may, Chairman, if we can go ahead and just proceed with the presentation.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Tom will be assisting with your presentation.
We can just go ahead and move to the next slide. Okay. So the MVA is a semi-autonomous agency governed by 9 board members, with 5 members appointed by the governor and 4 members elected by our MVA membership. Our current chair, as I mentioned, Ms. Viola Lepuzo. Here you can see our 8 divisions, which I will make reference to during the presentation. Of course, marketing and promotions of the Marianas comprise of the largest percentage of expenditures before COVID. Nearly 60% of our budget last fiscal year. Community projects handles our annual signature events and membership. Product development handles all of our destination enhancement projects. Next slide, please. Prior to FY21, the MVA was earmarked to receive 80% of the hotel occupancy tax collected. During those years, $1 was being appropriated to the Marianas Visitors Authority in addition to its earmarks. Next slide, please. You can just go ahead and another one. One more time. Okay. Here you can see visitor arrivals by month, FY18 in blue, FY19 in orange after Super Typhoon U2. But beginning in FY20 with COVID-19, there was a quick drop-off in arrivals. And now we are only receiving less than 200 visitors a month, and majority of them are all through via Guam. Next slide, please. Due to the very low number of visitors, the legislature made and saw it fit to have 2.2 million appropriation for the current fiscal year. For much of FY20 and the first several months of this fiscal year, we could operate with only 12 out of 34 staff on Saipan, Tinian, and Rota. For FY 2022, we are requesting an appropriation of 3.29 million to fund the operations of these 8 divisions, and you can see that in the prior years in our budget was much greater. We are confident tourism will start recovering more quickly beginning in the next few months. And the MVA will again require an appropriation next fiscal year to continue our work to reboot tourism with all of our staff back on board, working 40 hours a week, which we had started in April. I also wanted to point out that advertising events here refers to our annual signature events. Also, the support to other government agencies refers to the municipality's share of the hotel occupancy tax as required by Public Law 20-17. Next slide, please. I would also like to mention a couple of federal grants the MVA has received. A community development block grant for disaster recovery grant has been awarded to the MVA in the amount of 7.5 million. We have clarified with the grantor that this funding can only be used for specific marketing activities. So we have identified 3 allowable areas in this funding to be applied to. The first one is the development of global brand and relating marketing strategies, and we are preparing to issue an RFP for this. We had earlier issued an RFP for global branding about 3 years ago. However, due to unavailability of funding, we weren't able to move forward. The next one is offshore office representations for promotions and public relations. This will be used exclusively for Japan and Taiwan offices, as these are new contracts that will require new RFPs. And I just wanted to note that these contracts will be expiring September 30, 2021, with no option to renew. And lastly, a variety of marketing led by our local office includes renewed emphasis on Indigenous, Chamorro, and Carolinian cultures. This includes, for example, the Hafaday Tito Pledge program that we just had launched last month, and other related projects that will help our destination stand out among other competing beach resort destinations. Next slide, please. The second federal grant is from the Technical Assistance Program of the Office of Insular Affairs. We had just issued out an RFP for a new data collection and analysis system for visitor arrivals, as our current system is 2 decades old and is no longer supported. The new system will allow for more efficient collection and analysis of data from customs forms to help the MVA and all stakeholders using this information. Next slide, please. And this time, I would like to share with you highlights of a few programs we are currently working on or have planned for the next fiscal year, beginning with TRIP, or the Tourism Resumption Investment Plan, as developed by the Governor's Tourism Resumption Task Force and also adopted by our MVA board this month. Next slide, please. So this is information that was shared with us from the Department of Labor. As 19,000 local workers will cease receiving PUA in September, we need to get our primary economic driver back online to generate jobs and revenue. TRIP aims to do that while keeping our communities safe with an initial 8-week pilot program to help businesses reboot and start attracting visitors. And as you can see, out of the 18,000 of the CNMI PUA claimants, about 5,000 of them are directly related for tourism. But this does not include additional support, which is accounting and all other administrative services under the tourism. Next slide, please. So how will it work? Our target is Korea to begin with. In summary, the program provides incentives to jumpstart visitor arrivals beginning mid-July. These incentives will include aid to airlines if they sell less than 40% of their seats. Tickets will also be sold at a very attractive rate of not more than $400 per person. Previously, before COVID, a round-trip ticket would cost between $600 to $800. And another way for us to entice our tourists to come is that we wanted to have the airfare at a $400 cost. The frequency for this, we're looking at 2 flights per week. The selection is 2 airlines to provide these air services within the 8 weeks of this pilot program. Next slide, please. We had 3 air carriers from Korea pre-COVID: Lestiway, Asiana, and Jeju. To make sure the program works, we will start gradually with only 2 flights a week over the next 2 months. I would like to note that the airlines and hotels associated with the trip pilot program are being selected by an RFP process as advised by the Attorney General's office. And I wanted to also share that with the incentives for the airlines, 40%, if they were to meet 40% or more, no incentives will be provided to them. However, if they were to meet less than the 40% load factor, meaning 40% seats, then incentives will be provided to them. Next slide, please. So the biggest concern remains with community safety. All passengers must have a negative PCR test 72 hours prior to embarkation to Saipan. They will receive a second PCR test when they arrive on Saipan. They will be quarantined at a hybrid quarantine resort for 5 days where they be allowed to use the facilities. On the 5th day, they will be tested again for their third PCR test before they could be released from the quarantine resort. And I think it is also important to share that all employees that are working during this time will all be housed and quarantined at the resort as well. The hybrid quarantine facility will also be closed to the public. Next slide, please. After the 5th day, visitors will be allowed to stay at corridor hotels. The incentives will help the hotels offer pre-COVID services despite having only a few guests. These hotels will reopen their restaurants and amenities and return to their regular hours of operations. This will allow visitors to have the full 100% experiences. Next slide, please. Furthermore, to entice visitors to choose our destination over other competitors, travel bucks will be awarded to each visitor up to $500 to spend on each island of Saipan, Tinian, and Rota based on their length of stay. Other destinations are implementing similar incentives. These travel bucks will circulate in the local economy among companies that have 100% employees vaccinated. If the travel bucks are not spent, the money stays with the government. And finally, TRIP will cover the cost of PCR tests for each visitor. These incentives are necessary to get visitors to trust and travel to the Marianas again to help travel partners provide the services visitors want and expect. Next slide, please. In conjunction with TRIP, we are implementing the World Travel and Tourism Council WTTC Safe Travels program, aligning our local COVID safety protocols with standards from domestic and international tourism industry, trade, and consumers. Again, all of these efforts are being undertaken with the guidance of CHC and the COVID-19 task force, and everything is subject to change based on COVID-19 situation, both here and in our source markets.
Another major undertaking Thank you. Another major undertaking of the MVA is product development or destination enhancement. Next slide, please. We are pleased to report that improvements at many of our tourist sites has to continue throughout the pandemic, thanks to the assistance from various sources such as the Office of the Governor and Lieutenant Governor, Saipan Mayor's Office, Division of Parks and Recreation, Office of Grant Management, Department of Correction, and the generous support of private companies and organizations that have pledged through the Public-Private Partnership Program to adopt various sites for 5 years. These include major improvement at the Grotto, next, Bird Island, Suicide Cliff. Most of the improvement, you can just go ahead and click. Most of the improvement are structural restoration, railings, enhanced parking spaces, plant more flowers, and build viewing deck. So we are targeting most of tourist sites at Marpi area as well as Ladder Beach, Obzan Beach. It also includes repairs, destination enhancements in Tinian and Rota to improve visitor experience as well as visitor safety. Also, it will also include signages that were destroyed during the typhoons. So that it will include putting back our signages at different tourist sites on all 3 islands. Another important activity of the MVA is the organization of our annual signature events. We all know the value of events or sport tourism in Saipan, Tinian, and Rota. Not only do events provide worldwide media coverage, but it also contributes to our economy and encourage interaction among diverse cultures. Our residents are given the opportunity to attend or participate at our events and give back to the community through volunteerism. These events, next slide please, were created to attract visitors, add value to their stay in the Marianas, and attract media attention. Good news, Taste of the Marianas will return on August 27 to 28 during the TRIP pilot program. There are also a number of events organized by other agencies that MVA supports, such as the Rota Coconut Festival and Bisita Luta. Although we continue to monitor the COVID-19 situation and follow the advice of CHCC and COVID Task Force in terms of social gatherings, there are a number of events we're already anticipating to hold next year, and those are highlighted with an asterisk on this slide. Others on the list may be confirmed as we move forward. Next slide, please. Our managing director briefly mentioned about the Half-a-Day Tiro Pledge program launched during May Tourism Month by the MVA and the Saipan Chamber of Commerce. Next slide. The vision of this program is to develop, promote, and support the Half-a-Day and Tiro spirit in the Marianas, founded in indigenous culture, Chamorro and Carolinian. Next slide. This program is open to business, organization, and individuals willing to take the action to preserve, protect, and promote our indigenous culture through various activities in the areas of language, art, tradition, history, and values. For example, a company may pledge to answer the phone with Half-a-Day Antiro or display local artwork at their office or serve local snacks such as a pigigi or guzeria or potu, and at the same time educate their employees about our local history. This is a very exciting program, and we hope you will take the pledge. Next slide, please. I would also like to share with you highlights of the MVA strategic plans toward sustainable tourism industry from 2021 to 2031, as recently adopted by our board of directors. Next slide. This plan will highlight the Chamorro and Carolinian heritage, open the Northern Islands to tourism, increase visitors with an emphasis on high-end tourists that spend more and stay longer, and provide more diverse and authentic experience for our visitors. Next slide. This plan identifies a number of goals and objectives to accomplish by 2031. I would like to highlight our plans for the next couple of years. Under the Chamorro and Carolinian culture, that includes the launch of the Half-a-Day and Tiro Pledge. Next slide. Under research, we will begin an annual study on economic impact or visitor spending. In following years, we will conduct studies on visitor satisfaction and resident sentiment toward tourism. Next slide. For marketing, obviously there is a lot. Creating new promotional materials and an annual report on the return on marketing investment, getting local cuisine on menus, restaurant establishing inter-island cruises on traditional canoes, encouraging sports and ecotourism, identifying where tourists can experience authentic local culture, and getting more local arts and crafts in our stores. Next slide. For community programs, educating our MVA members on our culture, Chamorro and Carolinian, and creating an annual calendar of international sporting events. For tour guide certification program, implementation of a certification program designed specifically for marine sports operators, and working with law enforcement agency to enforce the program with random inspections. Next slide, please. For destination enhancement, completing renovation and repairs at various sites such as the Bird Sanctuary and Tetato Beach in Rota, establishing tourist accommodation in the Northern Islands, and establishing shower stoves at beaches, again, to improve visitor experience. And for safety and security, establishing a tourism ambassador program in Garapan by 2025. Of course, most of these objectives will require additional funding, partnership, and collaboration of other government agencies and private organizations. Again, additional funding. We believe that this tourism strategic plan lays a very clear path for tourism over the next 10 years, and we welcome your partnership in this and all of the efforts of the MVA. Now I would like to turn to our Managing Director for closing.
Thank you, Chairman Maglonia and honorable members. That concludes our presentations, and we're open for questions.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Ms. Judy. Again, thank you for your presentation. I'll just go ahead and start off with the questioning, and then I'll open it to the members. And so just to start off, have you started your discussion with the ARPA funds in addition to what the governor had proposed in volume 4? And if so, how much has the governor, I guess, committed, or have you come to an agreed amount from how much of the ARPA will MVA be getting?
We do not have a confirmed number, but during the CNMI trip, we were looking at allocating the CNMI trip to start off with the Korea market for 15 million. And then thereafter, we wanted to extend this to the Japan market as well as Taiwan. And then a lot for 5 million for potential developing markets. So the last communication we had was for 30 million.
Thank you for that. Sorry, let's switch over to the report that your office had provided our fiscal analyst. As of February 2021, it shows that the agency is owed 7.3 million from the central government. Do you know what that figure is as of today, or at least as of May 31st?
As of May 31st, 2021, the balance owed from the hotel occupancy tax from the Department of Finance is $2,056,744.40. And this is for FY 2020.
No, but your total receivables. So on page 1 of the report that you submitted to Mr. Demapan, you listed the payables for each month, but it ended on February 2021. Do you have an updated figure as of at least May?
Yes, that was the 2
So not
million.
just hot. Oh,
That's hot.
so. I guess what transpired from that 7 million down to 2 million. So back in February, you were owed 7 million. Yes.
Yes.
And as of May, you are owed 2 million. So, how much have they transferred in the past 2 to 3 months?
You want it? Okay. Okay. So on May 23rd, sorry, April 23rd, 2021, we received $3 million. And then on May 21st, we receive another $3 million, which equals to $6 million that was remitted from the Department of Finance. And so the breakdown of how those were expended was to remit payments to the municipalities. And that was $1.6 million. It was a replenishment to our building fund because the reserve building fund that was allocated for an MVA office, a permanent MVA office, was utilized for payroll and other operations. And then we also allocated about 433,000 for the familiarization tour as part of the Sinamay trip and the resumption of tourism task force tourism resumption. And then the remaining 1.2 was to be allocated for marketing promotions and destination enhancement.
How much to the building fund?
The building fund we remitted, we replenished back $1.5 million.
All right. So as of May 31st, you are current with all your hot to the municipalities.
So we actually already paid them 34% of what is being owed to the municipalities. And at the end of this month, we will be remitting the remaining balances as per Public Law 20-17, that a detailed report was to be submitted to the MVA and the legislature on how those funds were spent.
So 34% of the 1.6 that is owed to them was already remitted.
Correct. And so we're working on the remaining balance.
Who hasn't submitted their fund status report?
All 3 municipalities had submitted their detailed report to the MBA.
All right, and just one more before I hand it over to the members. So, from my understanding, last fiscal year, it was brought up about the salary, especially in regards to the managing director salary, and we saw from the news that you declined that offer. As currently, what's the salary range for the managing director? Is it 65 or is it already at 70, or where we're at with that? Because I see in your proposal that MVA is proposing a $70,000 salary for next fiscal year. Has that been approved by the board?
That has not been approved by the board. And yes, I did decline the salary increase of 5,000 from 60,000 to 65,000. And I had mentioned that my reason for declining is that, my staff have not been returned back due to furlough status. And so now the board had actually, approved to recall all of our staff back. And so the salary at 65 was effective in April, in May.
All right, and then the proposed salaries for all others are inclusive of any WGIs for all these employees.
Hello. It provide allowance for WGIs.
Okay. All right, I'll yield for now the floor. I'll open up the floor to the members. I recognize Representative Staffler.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. And good afternoon to our MVA team. Thank you for joining us today and for your awesome presentation and for sending us the regular social updates on our email. I had a few questions I wanted to ask about your offshore offices. How many offices offshore did we close during the pandemic?
We actually closed China, Taiwan, and suspended Japan, and reduced the budget for Korea.
So the Japan and Korea market were never, or the offices were not closed. They were just kind of like on hold.
Yeah, we suspended services.
My next question is with respect to maybe the other two and maybe compared to the two that are still open or suspended, like what is the startup cost of an offshore office on average? I'm sure it's different for each country, but like, to start over again.
If I may respond to that question, Congresswoman.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The way that those offices are run is that they respond to an RFP when we issue them. The startup cost for their offices is on them. It's the monthly charges that we pay, and then the services that they provide to us. But the CNMI does not spend extra money just to get them to start up.
Thank you. I remember hearing once from a farmer presentation that sometimes it is to restart a new office. That's why you don't want to close them necessarily. Suspending is, at least that was my impression.
Yes, that is correct. So what we did is instead of on the CNMI's part, it's actually very cumbersome to go through the RFP process. It's necessary, so we do it. So in order to cut down on administrative costs on our end, what we do is our contracts does provide for a suspension of services.
Noted. With respect to the social media work that you guys do promoting our islands, I was curious, how long have we been tracking the social media engagement?
So our marketing staff does that on a monthly basis. And so the way it's being tracked is also depending on what the theme is. And so for different months, we either support, we promote sports tourism or culture or history. And so those analytics will help us determine which of the photos or videos that we do share are attractions to our followers.
So I was curious, how does the social media engagement affect, like how does it translate to our arrivals or, what happens next? I'm curious. What do you see in the years that you guys have tracked it?
So, for example, if it was any of our events, right? So the social media posts based on the events would help us determine whether these events should continue, whether we should add additional more events, and how and which months should we have these events.
From all of your events, which one is the most popular?
The most popular is the Taste of Marianas.
I'm glad to hear that it's starting in August. Is it going to stay in August from here on out?
No, usually Taste of the Marianas is in May because that's also tourism month. And because of the pandemic and the current situations, we wanted to not cancel it but postpone it in the later months. And so that's the target date we were actually looking at in August.
I like that it is not competing with the Tinian Fiesta this time around. That's awesome. And I know that this is not maybe the right place, but I just hope that we don't compete with each other's islands with these events that happen, because then people have to choose which way to go. I was curious about the list of events. How do you prioritize which ones to hold? I know in a pandemic year you might have different reasons, but in a regular year, how do you prioritize which event to hold? There was a list.
If you can go to the signature events.
They're already signatured. Noted.
So if you take a look at the list, for example, the Tinian Hot Pepper Festival, that's a signature event for Tinian. So it's usually we will host an event on low peak period to entice travel, and it's also Saipan Marathon when we usually hold it in March. So we also look at if there's no other marathon taking place in the area, again to entice travel. To increase hotel occupancy rates with our hotel partners, to increase load factor. So usually when we identify an event, we try to host it on a low peak period to bring up the numbers.
Awesome. With respect to the new program coming up that's connected to the travel bucks, how many days on average are we thinking visitors will stay beyond the 5 days?
So the goal there is that we're hoping the visitors will stay 14 days, if not longer.
And how will the travel bucks work? Like, they're vouchers?
We actually have, we're in consultation with the Department of Finance and Office of the Attorney General in trying to ensure that we comply with regulations and the laws in issuing the travel bucks, whether it be by debit cards or by vouchers. In the past, MVA has had a voucher program that worked successfully. Although it was an administrative nightmare, it still worked. So there is experience with a voucher program. Department of Finance is suggesting that we use a debit card, to bring us into the future, but we just don't know that we can have everything in place in time. So it's basically in consultation with them.
Thank you. One more. I was looking at the list of your summary of grants, and I noticed that many of them were not really spent from the 2020 grants. I don't know if I missed it in the presentation, but why haven't that been spent, and is there a plan to spend them?
Can you specify what grants were you referring to?
Sure. I see. Oh, maybe you did talk about some of them now that I'm looking at it. I see the CDBGR or CD, yeah, and the TAP, the DRPW11. It's a FEMA grant, like the Rota maintenance. Rota. Are those, because it says 2020, so are those now that you're going to spend them now, or are they from previous years?
we're going to be spending them now. So for example, with the TAP grant, the reason why we haven't spent that because we were looking into going paperless. And so when we looked at the scope of work and actually did inquire from businesses that 202,000 is not enough. We would need at least half $1 million. And so that kind of redirected our strategy and went ahead and just proceed. And then with regarding to the CDB GDR, this was, the first funding to be ever given specifically for tourism for marketing. And so there was a lot of conversations with NMHC and HUT in regards to how can the MVA spend these funding. And so right now the current situation is that we have to sign an intergovernment agreement with NMHC. Our board and myself had actually signed that, and it's with NMHC for their own signatures.
Thank you for sharing your updates. I yield.
Thank you, Rep. Staffler. Going back to some of the signature events that you mentioned, have you guys done any analysis as to how much of a return on investment are you seeing from sponsoring these events? I mean, we continue to fund signature events on all three islands, but have you done any analysis as to how much tourists are these events attracting?
In terms of number of tourists that these are attracting, we have not done an official survey, but it's more like inquiries by our travel agents of offshore if we're having this event so that they can include it in their collaterals. We do promote it in social media as well as our offshore offices promoting the events at their end. Again, these events are held to give them experience of not only our culture, but what other experience that they can get by visiting the Marianas.
So when you fund an event, or at least offer some funding, like for Tinian Hot Pepper, 15,000. Rota San Francisco Fishing Derby, or the Sweet Potato Festival. All of these. So are the amounts that you've listed, are these part of these allocations are MVA's promotion, and then you also give a certain portion to the municipalities, or do you transfer these directly to the municipalities to help sponsor these events?
Mr. Chairman, so basically what happens is we collaborate with the municipalities on their needs. And so they tell us what it is that they need, and then we transfer the funds to them and we provide whatever support they request from us.
Okay, but to what extent does MVA go out, maybe to neighboring islands, to Guam, or even if there's an event on Tinian or Rota that you market it on Saipan and vice versa, or to what extent does MVA promote these events, these municipality events? Other than providing the funding directly to the municipality for whatever.
We issue out press release, not only on our local media, but also we provide it to our offshore offices. Again, regular posting on social medias and our website. We have a event calendar on our website where we encourage community organizations to post their events.
Does MVA invest in Facebook ads?
No, just regular posting, but we are also looking into expanding the reach through our markets. But But social website posting for or social media posting is a big undertaking with our offshore offices too. Yes.
Thank you. Floor is now open. I recognize Rep. Luzama.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, MVA, for your presentation. Just a concern, you mentioned that the offshore agent in Korea, there's no set fees until they send you the bills. Isn't that what you said, Chairwoman?
No, actually, that's not what I said, Congressman.
So how did you
What I said
what you
was
determine the payment for them for what they do in Korea?
their payments are determined on their submission to the RFP if they're chosen.
Okay. So it's coming from them. The price will come from them, correct?
Correct.
Would you try to say, for example, because I travel and I went to a specific agent to get this ticket and in a low price, have someone in Korea to work in a commission basis, that if they bring the number of tourists here, they get more money. If they bring in less, then they should not be getting the price that they want. And this is just a recommendation to see if they can entice them to compete. You know, have them go out on a countryside, and I know that can be done because the Japanese at one point of time they used to do that. They bring in a boat, and when they did, they get commissions, and at the same time they get the free ride as well. So this is my recommendation because I don't know what you're paying Korea, and it's budgeted for $200,000. This is just a thought, and because you haven't got, you can't give us the answer at this point of time due to COVID. So that's my concern, and I hope you guys will reconsider that. Thank you. I hear back.
Thank you, Rep. Luzama. Any other members? I recognize Rep. Probst.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Director, for you and your team to present to us today. We appreciate the information, and it's been difficult times. Obviously, you guys have had to make a lot of sacrifices with the furloughs, with every department. You've gone through some very tough times, and we do, of course, acknowledge that tourism is our most vital industry. It's so important to us. So we appreciate the ideas, your input, and I do want to talk about a couple of things, though. Obviously, your signature events have all been fantastic. I think many of us have either participated, volunteered, or attended them, and they've been great. One of the, not a signature event, but an event that did take place last summer was the controversial Deer Meat for Dinner event. And from my recollection, MVA did pay for part of this trip, right? Or a big part of it. Director, do you remember how much was spent from MVA for this Deer Meat for Dinner event or promotion?
Thank you, Congressman Probst. So I just wanted to make the clarification that the Deer Meat for Dinner is not an event. It's not a signature event, and it's what we call it a media fam tour. And so the total amount spent was $49,800, and this is for transportation, meals, and supplies.
Thank you for the clarification on that. And that was what was interesting. I know that there were other funding that was spent, not just from MVA, but MVA did cover a portion of it. And as you said, it was not a signature event. It was a fam tour. It's called Media Fam Tour. Robert Arrington, Dear Meat for Dinner, very popular YouTuber. He has 850,000 subscribers. And so that money that was spent, obviously, there was a lot of fanfare. There was videos that were put out there on YouTube. And this was a fam tour, a promotion. But in terms of, as Chairman mentioned before about a return on investment, aside from exposure, with his 850,000 subscribers, did this result in any economic gain or return on investment in terms of financial gain? Were there any tourists that came as a result of the trip, or has there been any fans that have come out to, especially his base is mostly from the US, not so much as in Asia, right? Is that correct? So I'm just wondering, how did that translate into economic dollars for businesses or for boats that could have maybe taken these potential tourists to the Northern Islands? Did any of that happen after that trip?
So with the fam tour for Deer Meat for Dinner, with about a total of 20 videos, that consisted of 18.4 views. And as an industry standard calculation, the exposure value for that was 644 million in exposure value. $644 million in exposure value. And so the media fam for Deer Meat for Dinner at the time, with the pandemic, nobody was traveling. And so just like any other tourism industry agency, that it was very important that we provide virtual experiences. And a lot of destinations were being creative in how we can provide that. No airlines, we had no international flights during that time as well. So there was no visitors that came in during that time or even after the Deer Meat for Dinner media fam tour was completed. I just did also wanted to mention that Deer Meat for Dinner is a promotional media exposure in how we can promote tourism in the CNMI. And it's because when we say about the CNMI, it's not just Saipan, Tinian, and Rota. We want to extend to the Northern Islands. And that's also to provide ecotourism, sports tourism. We need to expand our market and not just promote. We have to promote every little bit that we have, especially competing with other beach destinations. And so one of the examples that I did wanted to share, that one media exposure that we actually did, and this was February of 2020, was in Japan. And what that one was called was a creators camp. We spent $68,000 on that, well below what we spent for Deer Meat for Dinner. The total exposure value for that was $1.8 million. Again, under what Deer Meat for Dinner. And so it's very important that we continue to promote and be very creative. So the results from that was we did receive inquiries from professionals, business investors. And they also mentioned that once the slowdown of COVID, they're really looking forward to how we can help them come and visit the Marianas. In addition to that, this is a U.S. market. So Deer Meat for Dinner is a U.S. media fam. And so that was targeting our U.S. market as well. And so I did wanted to mention that, it's important for us to expand. We cannot depend on just Japan,
Thank you,
Korea,
Director.
and China.
Thank you. And I do want to. You said that earlier it was 49,800 that was spent for Deer Meat for Dinner. Then you mentioned that for the Japan it was $68,000. So there was more spent on the Japan promo, right? My question to you is: Has there been anybody? Here's the thing. This may be a promotion. 20 videos were put out. You state that there's $644 million in advertising from this? Is it?
It's an exposure value.
Exposure value. Okay. Okay. My question is, while people aren't traveling and everything, there was nothing to restrict anybody from coming out here to visit, right? If you're an American, if you wanted to come out here, could you still come out here?
Yes, you could.
Thank you. Did anybody come out after that trip to this day because of those videos?
No, because even at that time, there was no vaccines. Nobody knew anything about COVID-19 situation. We were trying to mitigate how safe we need to be.
So we've had none, zero,
Zero.
essentially. Okay. That was the question I wanted to know. how many have come in as a result of that. I appreciate the value, the amounts that you have put forward, but the fact is, this was at a time when no one was traveling, but you felt that the trip was still necessary. And I understand your situation, that you felt it was a great idea. There was just a lot of concerns with this trip that was taken, not to mention all the other things associated with it. If you can recall, the fact that there was transporting of a deer that was actually, I believe, against our own laws. There was burning desecration on the beach. There was, what else was there? Can you fuel on the sand? There's several things that happened on that trip. So my question, I guess, that I really want to know is this an undertaking that you're planning on? Is MVA going to support again in the future? A deer meat for dinner too? Do you feel that after everything has been done, said and done, if this is a worthy investment, do you feel that this is something that should be repeated?
If I may respond to that, sir.
Yes, you may.
Okay. Every FAM tour that's presented to MVA is brought to the board for approval. So when the situation arises, if a request is being made, then the board will entertain that request and make a decision. I think that it's unfair for Ms. Iacopo to be put on the spot to respond to your question, because she does not have the authority to approve or deny such request. Thank you.
Then, Chairwoman, you could answer the question then.
Then at the time that the request is made to the MVA board, the request will be vetted like all other requests, and a decision will be made.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Chairman, if I may, just one more question. Perhaps this question is okay. Thank you. Director, with Garapan being the tourist mecca of Garapan being the main place, we're preparing for tourists. MVA has participated, as we've seen in videos here and in the past, cleaning up a lot of all this destination enhancement, which is fantastic. Pretty dismal. I know that there's money coming in, $11 million coming in, but I'm talking about the here and now. If we're considering opening up for tourists, there is a lot of work that needs to be done in Garapan. I just walked through there last week with my wife, and we took photos of some of the things that we've seen. It's in pretty dismal shape. I also think about the big elephant in the room, the unfinished casino, and the road right in front of it. That road is in terrible shape. And again, this is a tourist mecca. I just wanted your thoughts on that with regard to the MVA's position in destination enhancement. Is MVA committed to assisting with Garapan revitalization with the road right in front of it? What are your thoughts on that?
Congressman, if I may respond, there is, I believe, a Garapan Revitalization Task Force that has been created, who have been granted federal grants in order to tackle that. And so MVA will be working in conjunction and in collaboration with that task force.
Thank you, Chair. And what I was alluding to, we understand that is coming forward. But as we prepare for tourism bubbles and other things, and if they are to be released after the 5th day, and you take a look around Garapan, is MVA considering partnering or investing or assisting in cleaning up it, working in cleaning it up right now? I'm just wondering about that. Is that a concern with regard to image? We're trying to bring in tourists and everything, but if you look at the current condition of Garapan, it's in dismal shape. What are your thoughts on enhancing enhancing Garapan as we speak?
I just want to clarify, was that a question to the?
Well, you can answer.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, let me clarify. Is MVA planning on investing any money towards fixing up Garapan currently? Again, this destination enhancement, all the wonderful things that's going to happen to Garapan is going to be happening later on. But again, if we took a drive right now to Garapan, I can show you a lot of things that is unsightly for any tourist. If we are, like I said, preparing for our tourists as it should be, and doing all this destination enhancement, my concern is the image that we have in Garapan itself right now. If you look at it, if you walk around, there's things that can be done. Obviously, sewage, there's not much you can do about that. But in terms of just the basic aesthetics, when it comes to trash, when it comes to cleaning up the sidewalks, and all kinds of things that we're currently looking at, I'm just wondering, is that a consideration for MVA to enhance the tourist mecca, Garapan, the looks of it currently?
MVA is currently collaborating with the Governor's Economic Council. They've during the presentation, we showed a bunch of pictures that the tourist sites were being revamped, whether it's by beautification or repairing and replacing rails for safety purposes. So if there are businesses and government agencies that come forward and want to address issues in Garapan, then MVA is absolutely behind it. And we share the concern that you have with Garapan. And if you're asking MVA if we're willing to invest, as long as you give us the funds, we'll make sure that the funds are spent in that investment.
Thank you, Director. Do you want to add to that?
Well, I did wanted to add that as far as like the Garapan trash collection as well, we continue to provide those services because, of course, Garapan is the core, right? So we want to make sure that that is maintained clean.
Thank you, and that's what I wanted to know, your current commitment, and again, the looks of it. Everybody thinks that we can just go there with, one day work, but it's going to take a lot more. But it's pretty downtrodden. There's weeds everywhere. There's just abandoned areas, and these are things, of course, you look in the long run, but just the current look of it right now is pretty dismal. I'm just concerned that we have spent so much in destination enhancement, and Garapan has been neglected. Even looking at the streets, I know this is not your area. This is DPW that really has to work on it, and of course the Governor's Economic Council and on all of us. But I do believe that MVA, with your experience and insight, could provide a lot to this in terms of the revitalization, but also the current situation that we're facing in Garapan. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Rep. Probst. I just wanted to ask here, does MVA have a revised budget? After knowing that, I'm assuming that at the time this budget was submitted, it was based on 2021 levels. And so now with the infusion of funds, has MVA prepared a revised budget?
No.
And so are you okay with the current proposal?
If the chairman is willing, we could we could review the funds that we have and the plans moving forward as is being suggested, and we'd be happy to present a revised proposal.
Because if this meeting was meant, I guess, also to provide MVA with the opportunity to ask for additional funding. So if I were to ask you now, how much additional would you need and what would they be used for? What would your response be?
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. If we could have just a minute, please.
Sure. Why don't I give you a 5-minute recess to allow you to put some numbers together, and then we'll circle back. Thank you. Short recess, member. All right, going back to what was brought up right before recess, Director, do you have anything to report?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may respond to the
Sure.
question. In consultation with the MVA team, what we'd be requesting is essentially a reinstatement of the FY 2018 budget amount of approximately $15.7 million, broken down as follows. $5 million for destination enhancement, $2 million for sustainability, $5 million for offshore offices, which would include the China, Korea, as well as others, and $1 million in MVA staff and equipment. As a point of comparison, we've currently issued an RFP for a desk audit. We feel that there are some positions at MVA that need to be updated. For example, for all incoming passengers into the CNMI, whether it be tourists or residents, they have to fill out a form, like literally a piece of paper that is submitted to Department of Customs. Two MVA staff have to go up there, collect them daily, and then scan the results, scan the forms, and then manipulate the results to get the information that we need. We think that we need to move into the era that we're in now and go paperless. So that's one of the things that we're hoping that we could do, we could transition into at the MVA, so that we could have that information readily available, not just for our office, but also our offshore offices, any of the municipalities that want to see the data of visitors coming in, or even the legislature prior to budgetary hearings. So we're hoping that a desk audit would reveal what positions are obsolete, what positions need to be updated, and how we can better serve our community to bring in more tourists by going paperless. And just as a comparison with Guam GVB, they have more employees, and their annual budget for their employees are about $3.3 million, I believe. Currently, we have 20, 34. Currently we have 34 employees with an annual budget of $1.6 million. I think that we anticipate that with the desk audit, it will reveal that we need more people with IT experience, but then that would require us to pay more money in salary. For example, we had a job vacancy announcement for a graphic artist, and the announcement had a salary. We had 10 people apply, but none of whom had the minimum experience necessary. And that's because we're not paying enough for graphic artists with the requirements that we need. So we just need to bring MVA, in order for us to do our job effectively, we need to bring MVA back up to where we are. And so that's a total of $13 million in addition to the 3.2 that we were originally requesting. And if the chairman would like, we could submit an amended budget proposal if we were granted enough time.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Yes, please. So we are expecting a revised budget from the administration come July 1st. So if you can also provide the committee with your additional requests come July 1st, that would help the members review your requests and see how we can assist. In addition to that, again, like I stated earlier, I know you mentioned that, or at least I brought up your requests and how it is similar to last fiscal year's request. And I did bring up the issue that funding to the other municipalities, particularly Rota and Tinian, at 27,000, compared to what we spend on the Northern Islands and all these other areas, that's something that I hope that MVA can consider in providing additional funding for destination enhancement. With that said, one more question that I wanted to get clarification on before I open up the floor back to the members is the FEMA funding and MVA's share. It looks like MVA needs about 30,000 matching. Has MVA identified the matching?
We've been in communication with NMHC, and they've mentioned that there's a CDBGR funding that is granted to the CNMI for the match.
Do you have an anticipated date as to when these projects can be started?
Of the project worksheets we received from FEMA, we have 2 projects for Rota under the Typhoon Mangkut, and those were quite small that we've actually initiated soliciting quotations to repair those sites, whatever's remaining for that. The big one is for the repair of the building, our building and Rota office, and that one is what we're waiting for with NMHC to confirm the funding for the match. And then we're actually looking into the opening up the RFP already and getting proposals.
So clarified. Thank you. I know. Oh, Chairwoman, recognize.
Yes, I apologize. Thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify that $27,500 that you had mentioned was that's actually sponsorship for actual events on Tinian and Rota.
Right.
But just for clarity's purposes, the payments to the municipalities, for example, Saipan is actually $575,112. To Tinian, it's $535,112, and Rota is $571,849. It's not the 27.5. So I just want to clarify that.
But isn't the 500 from the hot and that goes directly to the mayors?
Yes.
Right. So the issue that I'm bringing up is MVA's role in, because the mayor has the expenditure authority over these $500,000 for each island, but that's on the mayor's plan to market Rota. But in terms of MVA's role in trying to promote the other municipalities, that's what I wanted to bring up. So with that, members, the floor is now open, and I recognize Rep. Sablan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome Ms. Siakopo, Chair Lapuzu, Ms. Torres, and Ms. Pariso. My first question is just to clarify the numbers that you cited, Chairwoman. Are those for general fund appropriations or also for ARPA money that MVA is requesting?
I'm sorry, which money? We've been talking about numbers all day long.
The ones that you recited right after the break. What will you do with the extra money?
Oh, you mean the additional request?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the $5 million was for destination enhancement,
Mm-hmm.
$2 million for sustainability, $5 million for offshore offices, which specifically would be the China, Korea, and others, $1 million for MVA staff and equipment.
Okay, and that's for ARPA money or for
No,
general fund appropriations?
The request from the chairman was a revised budget for general fund appropriations,
Got it.
not ARPA money.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Mhm.
And so my next question then is on the proposal for ARPA money, specifically for tourism recovery. The administration did give a presentation last week that indicated that 49 million is being proposed for tourism recovery, and it's evident from the governor's proposal that MVA is not receiving the bulk of that 49 million. And so I just wanted to ask if you could clarify what role will MVA play in determining or managing the remaining 48 million that is being set aside for the industry's reset here. And to what extent do like those pilot incentives that you mentioned for tourism resumption, to what extent are those covered by your operations budget versus the ARPA money for tourism recovery?
If I may respond to that, the governor's presentation of 49 million is not something that we're going to be managing. As a matter of fact, what we had said earlier was with regards to the trip Korea specifically, we're anticipating about $50 million subsidy. We will not be managing that money either. That's going to be directly from Department of Finance. So the way that we're running the program is that we issue an RFP. There's a date for closing of the RFP, companies to be chosen, and then once the companies are chosen, they submit their invoice to MVA. We certify that the work was done. Then we submit that invoice to finance. Finance cuts the check.
Thank you for clarifying that. And then I'm really curious about the pilot program that, where tourists from Korea to begin with, right, would stay at a quarantine hotel. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on that? How does a hotel become a quarantine hotel under this program?
Can we go back to the slide where it has the 5 days? Okay, so while he's getting to it, this is in regards to what our chairwoman had mentioned, that it is in the RFP process. So that's how the hybrid quarantine facility will be selected. And again, this is in coordination and approval from the Attorney General's office. And so for the hybrid quarantine facility, what was proposed is that upon arrival in day one, all passengers will be transported to the hybrid quarantine facility. We don't know what the facility is, as the RFP is still ongoing.
Okay, but just to clarify, I understand this part of the process, but I was just curious about, so there's an RFP and
Yes.
hotels would have to bid, and there will only be one quarantine hotel?
Yes.
Okay, and thank you. And you mentioned that employees will be housed at the quarantine hotel, so would they also in effect be in quarantine themselves? Like they would be limited in terms of their ability to go outside of the hotel and interact with the community?
If they were to go out, they would have to be tested negative in order for them to be released out of the hybrid quarantine facility.
Wow, okay.
The way that, okay, so the reason why, the rationale behind that plan is to keep our community safe.
Right.
So we made it clear to all the hotels that are interested in this RFP that not only will they dedicate their entire facility. So let's say, for example, it's PIC that's chosen. So PIC would not be open to any of the members of the public.
Mm-hmm.
The only people that will be in PIC will be the tourists that are coming in. In addition, they will have their staff also housed in PIC. They will not be allowed to leave the hotel.
Wow.
Yes. And then
Okay.
after the 5 days, if those staff are done with what they're doing, they have to test out negative, as would anybody else,
Mm-hmm.
before they're released. It's a part of the contract. They don't have to respond to the RFP if they don't want to,
Right.
but it is a necessary requirement in order to keep our community safe.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like logistically, how does that work to require people who are residents here to stay at the quarantine facility, like just to go do grocery shopping or run errands or whatever, like they wouldn't be able to do that until after they test out after the 5 days.
That's right.
Right.
It's no different than working on a cruise ship. If you're going to go work on a cruise, you get on a ship, you go out to sea. You're stuck on that ship until you come back on shore.
Interesting. And so we're beginning with the Korea market. Do we know, like, just what is the average stay of a Korean visitor? At least when we had Korean visitors, how long would they stay usually?
4 to 5 days.
Okay. So it might be doable. Do you have forecasts for the China market or recovery of our Japanese market at this point? Or are we just focused on Korea for now?
We're just focusing on Korea for now.
Okay.
And if I may add, the reason why we're focusing on Korea is because we've had communication with the Korean government, they've sent us a letter saying, we want to start a travel bubble with the CNMI because you are the only level 1 jurisdiction. So it's safe for our community members to go there. And so that's the reason why Korea was chosen.
Okay.
We've reached out to Japan through our Japan offices, and the message from them is, we don't even want to deal with anyone until after the Olympics. So come see us after November.
Okay.
And China is closed. There's nothing we can do about that.
Just okay.
Hence the reason why to go with Korea.
And are there discussions at this point, at least with the COVID task force or with the partners in Korea, about any considerations that might be made for fully vaccinated travelers from Korea?
Yes.
What are those considerations look like?
We're working, like I said, the letter that was sent to us from the Korea government, that's one of their considerations, because they also have a 14-day quarantine requirement. So they're saying that because they're coming from a level 1 jurisdiction, which is relatively safe, like Korea, and if we're going to require them to come with a negative PCR test before arrival, and then require them to quarantine, then they're willing to consider not requiring their returning residents to be quarantined for 14 days.
Right, but I'm asking about fully vaccinated travelers. Would they have to be fully vaccinated as well, in addition to getting the PCR test, or no?
Right now, the plan is no.
Okay.
But it's still a plan in the works.
Sure.
It's not stagnant. I mean, it's not stagnant. It's not something that's set in concrete.
Okay.
Every day, every hour, this thing changes depending on our communication with our Korea office.
Right, yeah, and I can appreciate that. I know these are moving parts, moving targets. Thank you for addressing those questions. I wanted to just follow up on the question regarding Deer Meat for Dinner, because it's our understanding that there are plans to bring Mr. Arrington back and do another promotional trip to the Northern Islands. So am I correct in understanding then that there has been no request for MVA to support this second round? None at this point. What about for a fishing derby in the Northern Islands? Is MVA sponsoring that?
We haven't received any sponsorship letter from them.
Okay. Thank you. And then your strategic plan, I was looking for it online. I couldn't find it on your website. Is there anywhere online that we can find it, or could you provide that 10-year strategic plan to the legislature?
We can provide that a copy. I just wanted to also note that that is still a working plan. It's actually 60% done. And this is in coordination with the comprehensive sustainability plan.
Okay. Okay. I thought you said that it had already been approved by the board. So
It has, but it's still a working plan.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I would love to see it. I was especially delighted to hear that you are looking at shower stalls that are public beaches, and I wanted to ask if functioning restrooms are also part of that plan, and maybe maintaining the ones that are, salvageable, but also demolishing the ones that are not. We have some pretty atrocious restroom facilities on this island. Is that part of the plan?
Yes, and we'd appreciate the funding to make sure that those plans are put in place.
Yeah, it would be great to include that in your revised budget. Okay, and just a couple more questions, Mr. Chairman, and I will wrap this up. So going back to your tourism sustainability study, MVA did commission Horwath to do that study back in 2017. And one of the notable findings was that the target growth rates for the Best Sunshine Casino Hotel were unrealistic and unsustainable. So at the time, it was 1,600 rooms, a projected need for 8,000 to 9,000 workers, and the need for 1.5 million in visitor arrivals and 110 new flights. So there was a recommendation back then, which was 4 years ago, to readjust those growth targets and expectations. And I also recall from a tourism orientation several years ago that casino gaming was actually not among the key attractions noted among our main travel partners. And so here we are, it's 4 years later. We are definitely at a crossroads in our tourism industry and certainly in the gaming industry. And my question is, does MVA have any plans to follow through on the Horwath recommendations to do that realignment of growth targets and expectations and revisit the viability of casino gaming in the Marianas?
May I respond to that?
Sure.
I agree that the study needs to be reassessed. And it's not just gaming, it's also what's going on and where our community is going to go with regards to pandemic. We need to make major adjustments. We need to make adjustments in how we promote tourism in the CNMI. and whether we're going to welcome just tourists from Korea, Japan, are we going to welcome them from China, if that's even at all possible? That's not within our realm. There was an executive order that was issued by the President of the United States, and only he can rescind that order to allow tourists from China to start traveling again. It is really up to the legislature whether gaming is still going to be a part of the CNMI community. Tourism is the only economic engine of the CNMI. It's not tourism and gaming, it's just tourism. Gaming is but a component of tourism.
Right. And
So-
so the question, though, just because my time is limited,
Mhm.
the question is, is MVA planning to review the viability of the gaming industry specifically? I understand what you're saying about tourism recovery generally in light of COVID, and I mean it's going to be a long haul for every tourism economy around the world, but specifically for gaming, because we are at this crossroads now, and you're right. The legislature we are right now considering some key legislation that will impact the future of gaming here. And I wanted to ask MVA, can you assist in you mentioned some studies, some research analysis that you are undertaking? Could that be one of your, I guess, projects, is to assist the government in assessing the viability specifically of gaming?
I think the proper agency would be the Commonwealth Casino Commission. MVA is tasked statutorily to promote the CNMI. We promote the CNMI with what we got. If what we have are our beaches and our environment, then we promote that. If you tell us that we have to promote gaming, then we'll do that. If you tell us
Right.
not to, then we won't.
Right. I'm going back to your study, though. So okay, just so I understand your response to this question, MVA is not going to revisit the Horwath recommendation specifically with respect to the future of the gaming industry as a component of tourism for the CNMI. That's not in the plan right now.
Well, that's not in the plan right now, only because we have other pending issues that are more
Okay,
urgent, like
thank you.
bringing back tourists, period.
Right. Thank you.
So in the event that that issue comes up, it'll be addressed. But until then, our focus is going to be trying to bring back the tourists.
Right. Understood. But that issue is very much current, at least for the legislature, for the gaming committee in particular. So I wanted to find out what MVA's role could be. And I think that might be it for my questions. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
I recognize Representative Camacho.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, MVA. It's a three-part question. Is Pagan targeted to become a tourist destination anytime soon? And what attractions are being proposed? And lastly, what transportation is MVA going to resource for Pagan tourists?
Because it's a three-part. Can you repeat all three again?
Okay, is Pagan targeted to become a designated tourist destination? What attractions are being proposed for Pagan, and what transportation is MVA going to resource out to for Pagan tourists?
Okay, thank you for your question, Congressman. So like I mentioned, we definitely want to expand our marketing promotions, right? And the Commonwealth is not just the three islands. In regards to Pagan, yes, it would be nice to promote Pagan as a new tourism attraction to all of our visitors, and not just internationally, but domestically as well. Like I, for one, have never been there, right? And so it's important that we also make that available for our local community. And number two, in regards to what attractions we can promote that it's an ecotourism, right? We do know that there's fishing that can be done. That's another way that we can promote the islands and its natural beauty. It also has history over there as well. In regards to transportation, I think my team and I have not gone that far yet, as far as how do we want to how do we want to transport our visitors there. But I think we have potential, and with funding, I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to identify the resources and how we can provide transportation services.
Thank you, Ayubat.
All right, we'll take two more. Are there any other members? All right, if there are none, any for the second round? Recognize Rep. Lizama.
Thank you, Chairman. And this is just a follow-up with the travel bubbles that you're planning from Korea. You mentioned about, I've been there, going on a cruise ship, but this is not a cruise ship. This is on land, rotation. I'm sorry. Would you have another flight coming in to overlap that, or it'll be just like a charter each time? How is that going to happen?
We would like to have regular flight schedules. And so because of the logistics part, right? For example, the PCR testing, we do not want to have both of these flights come in at the same time. So we want to be able to avail a lot time to process and for them to take the test and transport them and then get ready again for the next flight. And so we also anticipate that we do not want these flights to also overlap with our current flights from United.
That's clarified, and it's very important because when you're overlapping, then of course, the security or the safety is not going to be there. So yes, with charter flight by certain period, will I believe make the plans work. And thank you for the clarification, ma'am. Thank you. I hear back. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Lizama. Before that. Tom. Tom. Before that. Recognize Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon. We're just quick question. I was going to ask a question whether MVA requires airlines to play, informational videos for inbound passengers, the do's and don'ts, history of the CNMI. But then I was going to ask also, are you MVA? Do you feel my frustration when we go to our tourist sites and beaches and we see that most of the trash that's been there are actually from our own local community? Is that a frustration you share with me? And I understand that that's really not your area of expertise or to do anything about it. But is that something that through your destination enhancement, you're working with agencies such as DLNR, Parks and Recs?
Yes, we actually have been supporting, working together with the Division of Parks and Recs in maintaining and cleaning our sites, and we actually support them by providing them fuel and supplies.
Okay, and I thank you for that. That's a very beautiful picture on the slide. I would hate in the background floating foam plates and plastic bags and beer cans. Right? So, thank you for your time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I recognize Rep. Staffler.
Thank you, Chairman. I wondered, thinking back to the previous terrible experiences our visitors would have at the airport, have you guys worked with the airport about the arrival situation with this new plan?
Um, yes, Congresswoman, the task force is actually communicated with CBP to ensure that the long delay that you're talking about does not happen when they come in. And there's going to be delays because of the PCR, but we're hoping that in collaboration with CBP, MVA, CPA, as well as the COVID-19 task force, that we're able to provide a more seamless experience for our tourists.
I really look forward to that. I think that will be a really important piece to bringing back visitors for repeats. I'm glad to hear that you work with Parks and Recs. I was remembering when we were in Rota and Tinian, they were discussing a lot about how the mayors have pretty much taken over the sites. With the returning of tourists and bigger budgets, will you guys go back to collaborating and I guess providing more staff on the two islands? Or is that a mayor's thing?
We actually just issued an RFP again for more equipment for Rota and Tinian in order to support the mayor's offices in maintaining the tourist sites on both islands. We do have staff, MVA staff. Unfortunately, we're very limited with our limited budget. So that's why we network and collaborate as opposed to trying to tackle it ourselves.
Thank you. I guess I'd like to advocate for more staff on those islands because I hear the staff that are taking care of it now. When you were still in operation before the pandemic, they had additional people who would go out, and now it's a lot harder. So I hope that comes back. And finally, actually no, that was all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Staffler. With that, back to the first round, Representative Danita Yangtumay.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, members of MVA. Very simple question. I'm not really familiar with these off-island offices. Is it like the medical referral office in Hawaii? Who mans these offices? And um, are we paying for it, the rental? And are you planning to team up with CEDA, since I think they're also planning to have off-island offices? Thank you.
So our offshore market offices and how we obtain them is through an RFP process, right? And so what that office does is that they are like our liaison, and so they work for MVA to market and promote the Marianas, and if there's and they're also working with the industry partners, and that's also to participate in any travel fairs, do business to business meetings, and so to provide all communications of what is going on here in the Marianas, and that is also being relayed to them, so that way they can relate to all of the tourism industry partners in any of those offshore markets. And yes, we do pay them.
I'm sorry if I can just add, but they're not like the medical referral offices in Hawaii or Guam. Not all.
No.
They're not like that at all.
So those who man them are from that country? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Danita. So just to close, a few closing questions. How many parks does MVA manage on all three islands? Or tourist sites?
I think I wanted to clarify that none of these tourist sites, MVA is not the designated agency, but we do work with the mayor's offices in all of the municipalities and other agencies to maintain them. But I do know, for example, the island of Tinian, there's about a little over 20 sites that we do maintain, but again, we do work with the municipalities as we do not have the enough manpower to clean up the sites.
Thank you. Well, the reason I asked this is because there seems to be a duplication in tasks and jobs with Parks and Rec and MVA, and so I wanted to see if this is something that MVA would support, is to transition all these field workers into Parks and Recs and have Parks and Recs solely manage all these sites, as opposed to MVA, using the resources to manage the sites and focus more on the advertising and marketing aspects of our sites. And so, yeah, I just wanted to get an amount or a number as to how many sites MVA. But is this something that MVA would support, moving over this responsibility to Parks and Recs, or at least the municipality?
If I may give some background, during MVB time, we used to have a field operation division which managed and maintained the MARPI sites. And then over the years, I guess, the idea was to make MVA focus more on promotion, and we only so that responsibility got transferred to Parks and Rec, but only for Saipan. For Tinian and Rota, we did maintain our site maintenance. We kept our field ops staff. We do, like Director mentioned, we do continue to be a part of it by providing some funding, some support in terms of gas or some equipment for the maintenance of our tourist sites.
Thank you for that. Well, I mean, there's even the runaround of the mayor having to request MVA for funding, but if we move some of that responsibility over to the municipalities, and that'll, lessen the burden on MVA, as well as, again, provide MVA with more room to focus on promotional efforts. But that's something that the members, the legislature can consider. And so I wanted to see if this was something that MVA would support, so that should legislation be done, we have the support of MVA. But that's something to consider moving forward. And so with that, members, if there are any additional questions that you may have, we can provide that to MVA before they submit their revised budget. I do hope that part of your budget request that you submit include additional activities that we are now hearing of, and I'm not sure if MVA is a part of, but we're hearing about the what do you call this, on Tinian, the cattle, like the 3 Bs that they're going to have next month, right? And so it's part of their promotional activity for their slaughterhouse. And so, these are additional events that are just coming, we're being made aware of. And if MV is that something that MV will want to partner with, then please include that in your budget request. If it's something that you're aware of, because it was brought up in, I believe, one of the two, the governor or the council, that the focus is, we should focus more on Rota being an agricultural tourism destination, Tinian being a rancher / farming industry. And so if that's something that the Governor's Economic Council is suggesting. I'm not sure if MVA is aware of already, but that's something that we would like to see and see how we can provide our support. And so again, with that, members, and at this time, we'd like to take the opportunity to thank you, Ms. Joanne, Director Priscilla, Chairwoman Alipuzo, and Ms. Judy and your team for coming in today and answering the questions that the committee has. If there's anything that you would like to share with the committee prior to the submission, or have any questions in regards to the committee's request that you would like to include, please feel free to reach out to my office, and I'll try to get you the answers you need. So with that, thank you again for coming in, and I now hand the floor back to you for any closing remarks that you'd like to give.
Thank you, Chairman McLonia and honorable members, for giving us the opportunity to share this budget and ongoing plans the MVA has set forth. We would like to, extend that, our office is always available if we wanted to share any information, and to also help each other out, like what we had presented in our Hafade Tiro Pledge, Tafanunua Sibwe Tipio, and we look forward to the legislature to be a part of the program and to promote our cultures, as it is very important that this is one of the marketing strategies that really sets us apart from any other destination. And again, tourism is everybody's business.
Thank you, Director. All right, members, with that, we now move on to the next item on the agenda. Announcements? Any announcements from the members? All right, just a quick one. For next week, we have DLNR on Tuesday, and then the NMTI for Thursday is rescheduled to April 30th at the request of NMTI. June 30th. All right, members, if there are none, can I get a motion to adjourn? All right, motion was made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. This meeting is adjourned at 3:03 p.m.